They are concerned about the anti-vaccine movement and how their message is resonating with certain groups, including recent immigrants. They point to a spike in measles cases last year in Minnesota among recent arrivals from Somalia. For more health news, go to foxnewshealth.com. House Call for Health, I'm Joy Piazza, Fox News.
And U.S. consumer spending edged up a slight 0.1% in September. A disappointing performance, as a rebound in auto sales was offset by weaknesses in a number of other areas. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Rod Rosenstein okayed the final FISA warrant. I mean, that FISA warrant to spy on Carter Page was re-upped 3 times, and the final one was given the green light by Rod Rosenstein.
Bruce Orr's wife was working for the opposition. Glenn Simpson was certainly working for the opposition, and Michael Zussman, the lawyer of Perkins Coie, was the key lawyer for the Democrat National Committee and the Clinton campaign. And yet, the document that was put together, this dossier, was what was used to go to the secret court to get a warrant to go spy on the other campaign. Well, that is never supposed to happen in this country, but it did.
You know, the same folks that prejudged Hillary Clinton's innocence, prejudged Donald Trump's guilt, and the same names are the same folks whose conduct is at issue with respect to how evidence was presented or not presented to the FISA court.
And now, Stacey Washington.
Well, welcome to the program. It's Monday, and guess what? We're slamming and jamming. We're having a great time. I'm so excited. You know, some people act as if Monday's a bad thing or if they have the blues. Not me. I'm raring to go. So excited about today and the rest of this week, where we have Share-a-thon going on starting tomorrow. Today on the program, we have fantastic first-time guest on the program, John Miller, the host of a program, Washington Watch, I believe it is, on CRTV. Yeah, so CRTV. He's a host there. Huge with his viral videos, and he's going to come on and talk to us about Kanye West and the kind of, it was like a hit job, a political hit job that CNN executed on him after he went to the White House last week. I guess, live radio, you guys. I guess that it's not really appropriate for a black person, especially one who does the kind of music that Kanye West does and is such a gloriously, fantastically popular, mainstream, secular rap artist. He's not supposed to be able to go to the White House and have a conversation with the most racist man in America, Donald Trump. And of course, I'm being sarcastic because it's pretty clear there's not a racist bone in Donald Trump's body. Honestly, I mean, you just can't convince me. Racists don't behave like that guy. So he's going to come on and talk to us about that. We are also going to be diving into, I guess it's breaking news because the numbers have been ratcheting up. It's this revelation made to the Senate just last week by Secretary Kristen Nielsen. She went before them to testify about illegal immigration and how the funds are being spent. And one of the things that she pointed out is that we have not enough bed space for people who are known to be plotting terror attacks here in this country. And there used to just be 500 of them. And then there were 1,000 of them, and now there are 2,500 of them running around the country, but we can't detain them because we don't have anywhere to put them. And that's the idiocy of our current immigration system, where we're spending billions of dollars building new detention facilities for people who should be just turned away at the border. Meanwhile, people who are already in the country who should be detained are not detained because we don't have space for them. I mean, I have words, but I'm gonna keep this up and above board here. It's It's enraging. It's absolutely ludicrous that this is what's going on. And you wonder why I say we need smaller government, because the more money we give to the government, the more idiotic things like this we have to put up with. This is what they're doing with our tax dollars. So we'll talk about that. And Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, turns out she does have a drop of Indian blood after all, possibly, according to a new DNA test that she had done privately by a friend, someone who he has excellent credentials, but he's still a friend of hers. And so I really, honestly, why should I believe it? And also, who cares at this point? She's already used it to get a job at Harvard and everywhere else. And now she wants us to be, what, comforted by the fact that she's got some Indian blood? So do all of us. I do too. So what? Never used it to get a job or anything. So first off, I want to get into our daily confession. Starts off in Romans 8:37. And just a reminder, here on Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk, we're doing the daily confession because a lot of the news that we cover on the show, while I present it in as upbeat a manner as I possibly can, it can be a bit of a downer sometimes, listening to how our tax dollars are wasted, listening to how people in Washington, D.C. who were elected and specifically gave us a list of things that they would do, go to Washington and do something else. And especially in light of the fact that the polarization in this country has just become, it's so obvious, and it hurts a lot of people. It's painful. And I think a lot of people are probably experiencing unforgiveness and, sleeplessness and anxiety because of it. But there's an answer to that, and it's always God's word. And so he provides for us to confess his word to him. That's why I call it the daily confession. And you can take the scripture for the day from the show, and you can go to the Lord in prayer and confess it to him so that his word, it calms us, it lifts up our spirits, it lifts our heads, and it readies us to be able to encounter everything that we have to encounter on a daily basis. So in your morning prayer time, you have certainly Bible verses that you're reading. You can also read those in prayer to our Father in heaven, and it's just fantastic. It's a real game changer if you do it on a regular basis, if you commit to it. So today's daily confession for this program is, nay, in all things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. That's Romans 8:37. No, in all things, we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Now, a conqueror is not just winning a little bit. A conqueror is not just someone who wins a part of the war. The conqueror is the one who sustains through many, many, many different individual battles, and overall is the winner, is the one who comes out on top. This Bible verse says that we are more than conquerors, but it doesn't say through Stacey's a conqueror through her own might or her own strength, or Stacey's a conqueror through her husband, or she's a conqueror because she's a radio host. It doesn't say Stacey's a conqueror because she has some kids, or, what have you, because you're tall, or whatever. None of those things make us conquerors. It says we are, in all things, we are more than conquerors, more than victors through him who loved us. And that him is with a capital H. It's our Father in heaven. And then to connect that up, being confident in this very thing, he who has begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. So until Jesus Christ comes back for us, we can be confident that God will continue to perform the good work that he started within us. He will continue until Jesus' return. That is pretty amazing, because God is not a man that he should lie. So he never lies. His word is always true. His word never returns void. And he's always for us rather than against us. And he's always working things out for our good. And in him, we are more than conquerors. That's a lift for me. I'm jazzed about that. That gets me pumped up to be able to face whatever I have on my plate, whatever I have to battle down that day. I know I'm doing it in him, and that through him, I'm more than a conqueror. And so are you. So that's our daily confession. So now okay, here we go. We're all girded up. We're ready to rumble. Here is this. It's Kirstjen Nielsen. She's talking about, she's the DHS secretary. We don't have enough beds to detain the 2,500 illegals who are plotting terror attacks. It's number 3.
Right now, as I sit here, we're currently investigating about 5,000 terrorism cases across America and around the world. And about 1,000 of those cases are homegrown violent extremists, and they're in all 50 states. In the last year or so, we've made hundreds of arrests of terrorism subjects. Those include things like the arrest of a guy plotting to attack San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf on Christmas Day with a combination of vehicles, firearms, and explosives. Or the arrest, Mr. Chairman, of a woman in your home state, a Wisconsin woman, maintaining a virtual library of instructions on how to make bombs, biological weapons, and suicide vests to assist self-proclaimed ISIS members. We've also disrupted a plot to blow up a shopping mall in Miami or to blow up a number of the celebrations of July 4th in Cleveland.
So in the big scheme of things, and I'm sorry, that's Christopher Wray talking there, not the DHS Secretary Nielsen. And we're talking about our government going through and systematically making a priority out of people who are coming to the border illegally. So they're coming to the border, they're coming here to stay, they're bringing their kids so that they're not turned away at the border. And their intention is to get an ankle bracelet, get a slip of paper, and they're not reading it. They don't care what the slip of paper says. They just want to be released into the interior of the country. Now, if anyone else was to do this, I don't know, say break into your house with their kids and they're home when you get home from work, and so the government says, well, people keep breaking into other people's houses and they're homeless and they just need a place to stay. And since you have more bedrooms than you have people, so you have 3 bedrooms and you have, 4 people, but all 4 of you could be in one room. So let's just, you guys stay in one room and let these people stay here until we can get to court and figure out whether or not they have a right to stay there. And you would say, they don't have a right to stay here. This is my private property. And the government would say, yeah, it is, but it's also in the best interest of this family for us to find out if they have a valid reason for breaking into your house. And you'd say there is no valid reason for breaking in. Well, but they might be good voters for one political party. So yeah, we do think there might be a reason. Do you hear how idiotic that sounds? And that idiotic sound is happening all over the southern border of the United States as we allow people to come in because, well, they put one foot on American soil, so now they're owed a case. And these kinds of nonsensical rulings happen at the appellate court level by activists who just want illegals here because it's what Republicans don't want. And that's really all it boils down to, in my opinion, because I've looked and I've read and I've spent time listening to the opposing viewpoint. Why should they be able to stay here? They're never able to give an answer other than, well, we want them to, and Republicans are racist. They should be able to stay here because their skin is brown of some sort. It's tan, it's brown, it's cappuccino, it's latte. It's something other than Caucasian. And so they deserve to be able to stay here. Well, what if they're committing crimes? Well, Americans commit crimes too. There is no valid reason that the Democrats can give for wanting these people here in this country other than they hope the people will vote for them. And over the weekend, I saw a story on Drudge where they're actually Democrat pollsters and politicians and all the people who kind of crunch the numbers to predict what's going to happen in an election. They're all upset because what they're seeing is all of the focus on people being here illegally is causing people here who are here illegally to not want to interact with the government because they're afraid of being deported. And it's a very real fear because President Trump is doing what he can under current law with the resources that are available to him to deport people who are here illegally. And there's no more, we're only prioritizing dangerous felons and criminals. It's whenever we encounter you, if we find out that you're here illegally, you will be subject to deportation. So that in and of itself is discouraging people, even people who are here legally, from interacting with the government to vote. Now, do I agree with that? If you're here legally, you have every right to vote. But does it not show you that a whole community is being stigmatized by certain members of their community who look like them, but are not really members of their community? If you are Hispanic or Mexican or some type of Latinx and you're in America legally, you lawfully have citizenship here, you should not have your existence in this country and your citizenship, your Americanness, if you will, questioned because of people who want to be citizens of this country and are willing to do it by hook or by crook instead of doing it legally as you did. It's the same thing that Black Americans experience when say, for instance, like the story from this weekend here in St. Louis, a young black professional man was trying to get into his fancy, expensive loft building, and a lady wouldn't let him in because she said he didn't belong there. Now, this woman did not have a right to stop this man from entering this building. He had a key fob and he'd already buzzed his way in. But because of others in that same vicinity who don't have a right to be in those buildings, who are committing crimes repetitively, robberies, petty theft, muggings, carjackings, etc., that young professional man was experiencing the backlash that other people deserve, not him, because he had a right to be there. He had an apartment there. He rode the elevator up, used his key to open his door, and went inside and was sitting at home doing whatever he was doing, had every right to be there when the police came knocking on his door. So when we don't enforce the law, the unintended consequence is that other people are mistreated because of that. We shouldn't be building detention centers to house people who shouldn't be here. We should be housing individuals who need to be arrested because they want to do terrorism to us. And if people are here illegally, they should be deported. It's not that hard. When we get back, we're going to have John Miller for you. Stay right there.
I would like to actually thank you for having your programs on that talks to with a biblical background in today's society. I like seeing a husband, wife actually showing God's love in the morning. Stacey on the right is wonderful. Abe is incredible. Lion Chasers. And I appreciate you bringing E.W. Jackson back. He's actually from our area, and he is a light. So I appreciate your network. I appreciate every one of your shows. Keep spreading God's word. Keep being the light on that hill.
Let's impact even more lives. Partner with us for our 3-day share-a-thon starting tomorrow here on Urban Family Talk.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. I know a woman who finds it very difficult when she's not at the center of attention. To be recognized is extremely important to her, and when she feels as if she's been overlooked or slighted in any way, watch out. The defending party will know about it and pay for it, usually by being shut out or excluded from some imaginary circle of privilege. Mark it down. A fragile ego often feeds a vengeful spirit. In Esther chapter 3, verses 4 through 6, there's a story of a man who had an enormously fragile ego simply because he was used to being at the center of attention. It's a story of Haman, who came after Mordecai and the Jews to kill them. Listen to these words. Now it was when they had spoken daily to him, and he would not listen to them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's reasons would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage to him, Haman was filled with rage. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him who the people of Mordecai were. Therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, who were throughout the kingdom of Ahasuerus. This guy was pretty upset. Here are some implications for us. First, before you embrace an offense, seek an explanation. It may not be what you perceive it to be. Second, consider that your expectations may be unreasonable. Sometimes we just need to chill. Third, it is always wrong to be vindictive and vengeful. Here's what I want you to remember today. We have to keep our egos at the foot of the cross. We're called to love those who offend us. Let's move toward people. Don't push them away.
Legacy Moment with Crawford Loritz is produced by Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
Welcome back to Stacey on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Go to StaceyOnTheRight.com and hit the subscribe button. Also, go to AFR.net and hit the subscribe button there too. AFA.net as well. Hit up all of our good websites, UrbanFamilyTalk.com, and find us on Facebook. All of the things I just listed, we all have Facebook pages for all of our good stuff. So check us out on there as well. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome John Miller. He's the White House correspondent for CRTV, and it's my first time getting to chat with him. John, thank you for joining the show today.
It's good to be here, Stacey. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I love seeing your face come up on my Facebook feed because when I click through, I know I'm going to get some unvarnished, probably politically incorrect truth, and it's always straight, no chaser. So
that's how we do it.
Oh my goodness, and I'm glad. I know many who are appreciative of the work that you do there, especially since for those of us sporting the permanent tans, which is you and I, John, it can be tough. It can be a little tough. So let's talk about this. You've got Kanye West. Last week, he went to the White House. This is not a shock. He's been there before. He's been at Trump Tower. He wore his MAGA hat after a SNL presentation where he went into a rant and people didn't like it. But then after he went to the White House and shared and, he had his moment, then there was a little bit of rancor on CNN. Tell us what you saw.
Yeah, just a little bit. It was actually before he even got to the White House. Don Lemon had a panel on his show with Tara Setmeyer, Bakari Sellers. They're both CNN contributors. They're employed by the network, and they did a panel where they proceeded to call Kanye a Negro who doesn't read, as well as a token Negro for the Trump administration. They also say they want to trade him in the draft like he's some slave. So apparently now it's okay for us to use the term Negro to describe fellow black people. I mean, I didn't know that was okay since maybe the 1960s, but apparently that's fine. So, I mean, and that was just the beginning. All weekend, Stacey, there was, backlash and people calling Kanye names and treating him like basically he didn't know what he was doing, like he was some pathetic child. And it's just incredible to me, what you can do to black folks when you don't agree with them politically. Apparently, it's okay to demean them. Apparently, it's okay to call them names like Negro. And we get it all the time, but Uncle Tom, Coon, every name in the book, every name that is considered a racial slur, you name it, all of a sudden it's okay to call someone that once they're on the conservative side. So it was just incredible to me, and I actually demanded an apology from CNN for letting this kind of language air on their network. I mean, they're a mainstream cable news network. They should at least have some standard of decency to not let abject racism go out on their airways, but apparently I haven't heard back from them, so apparently that's they have lower standards than we even thought.
Oh, John, I was waiting for you to say, and then I received an apology. Or
aren't you shocked that they did not apologize? I haven't heard jack from them yet.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. But I thought because it was you and they know that when you get on a roll, you can really let people have it, that they might be concerned, but apparently no. So let's unpack this a little further. What are they afraid of? Why did the overseers in the Democratic Party have to unleash Tara Setmeyer, who calls herself a Republican, and Bakari Sellers, who, he's so well educated, but what nonsense he spews, and then Don Lemon. Why would they release these three well-educated black folk to rein Kanye back in? What's going on?
I think it's to be honest, I think they're terrified. I think that they have been trained to think that black people cannot be Republicans or conservatives. And, I'm still trying to figure out, Stacey, what the mentality for black liberals is. Because I understand what it is for white liberals. White liberals, they love black folks. They love African Americans. They say they're fighting for minorities until they realize they can't get your vote. And then, of course, you're meaningless to them, and then they treat you as the slave that they think you are. But I still can't quite put my finger on why educated and smart black liberals all of a sudden turn so harshly on fellow blacks, because it's they should be fighting. The entire struggle for black people in America has been the fight for equal rights and equal freedom. And and I've said this before, but the epitome of that freedom is the ability to think for yourself. And as blacks, we should be championing that for all blacks around the country, even if you disagree with it. But for some reason, they feel the need to tear each other down. And to be honest with you, I don't have an answer for why they feel the need to do that and unleash in the way that they did, other than the fact that they're worried that the Democrat Party is going to start to lose votes when other blacks start to wake up.
But that's the answer. There is no other answer. You correctly, basically broke them down. But I asked you why, because I want to make sure people understand that there is a why. There is a reason why they're doing that. And you're right. When you say Democrats love black people, I was chuckling to myself because they do love compliant black people who don't expect anything back for their vote, who don't see the vote as transactional, but they don't love black people like John Miller, who I'm speaking with. If you just joined the show, we're speaking to John Miller, White House correspondent for CRTV. they don't love black folks like Stacey Washington. My email box proves that. I mean, I've got some really real dandy little missives from folk who they get upset when I start connecting the radicalism that we're seeing on college campuses to democratic ideology that's being taught in K through 12 schools. Oh, they don't want to hear that. So let's see. I mean, it's racism, right? I mean, to call a person a Negro?
Bare-faced racism.
Okay.
I mean, if you were to just for a minute take the situation and put it on the other side. And, you know, people say, well, it can't be racist because they're black, and black folks can't be racist against black people. You know as well as I do, if, for instance, you, me, you know, someone else who's a black conservative, they got a panel of black conservatives on Fox News and started calling Obama the token Negro, or started calling Obama and Michelle Obama Negroes who can't read. You don't think they'd be coming after us and saying that's racist? They absolutely would.
Someone would have to lose their job.
We would and never be employed again, and they would be calling for our heads. There would be protests in the streets, and you know, other than a few networks and social media, which went ablaze on this, they're really not covering it. And so it's incredible to me. I think that's why it's important for people like you, people like me, to actually speak out about this, because if we don't, who is going to?
Now, I'm with you, but what is happening when, because I actually put on my Facebook, and I got a few people angry at me, but I was just kind of, I don't know how it is on the weekend when you start vibing on something and you're just like, I'm just going to post this on Facebook and, let the chips fall where they may. And sometimes it's a horrible idea, but I don't really care because it's my Facebook. I'm just sharing what I think at the moment. And I put on there that, Kanye, he's a nice guy and everything, and I'm glad he's free and he's thinking freely for himself, but he's not a leader on the conservative side, because I'm seeing people make memes for him like they made, for Mitt Romney and all that. And he's not a leader, but by the same token, he has, meeting with him seems to precede an uptick in support in the black community for Donald Trump. So, I mean, is that connected?
Yeah. And I think that's the great thing. I don't think anyone is calling listen to Kanye's lyrics. Mm-hmm. I mean, if anyone's trying to make him, a leader of conservative thought, they are sorely mistaken. He's not, and the minute he says something I disagree with, in fact, there's a lot of stuff he said at the White House that I don't agree with. But I feel compelled to stand up for him because he is thinking for himself, and we should be free to do that. Even if we disagree with the person, we should be free to think for ourselves, and we should not have to cave to some narrative and some political party just because they say this is how you must think. And so, I don't care if Kanye's a communist saying this stuff. I'm going to stand up for his rights. I would never say this stuff about Obama. I would never talk about the Obamas with those terms. The term Negro, I would never call a fellow black guy the word Negro. And the idea that it's okay to do that because they disagree with you politically, I want to talk about people's ideas. I want to talk about, where I agree with people, what's a good idea, what's a bad idea. I don't want to degrade them and diminish them to the color of their skin. So, I think the people who are making Kanye, the new conservative face, I think they're probably making a mistake because, Kanye, is going to come out next month and say something crazy. I support universal health care or something crazy like that. And then we're going to have to walk back everything. So I think, you have to be careful in saying, I disagree with Kanye on a lot of stuff, his music and his politics, but I will stand up for his right to say whatever he wants. And I absolutely think it's a great thing that he's opening black people's eyes. I just saw over the weekend Designer, who's another hip-hop artist, coming out and saying, I love, what Kanye is saying about making America great again. And I absolutely love the idea that Kanye is saying we cannot be victims anymore. We have to get over our victimhood mentality. We have to get over this mentality that we are still slaves. I mean, I'm sure you get it all the time. I get it all the time in my inbox, slave language saying, I see there's always one like you on the plantation. And it's like, bro, what are you still doing on a plantation? Why are we using plantation language to describe each other? The Emancipation Proclamation, that was 1863. All right, so we need to move on. And just, I feel bad for the people who still feel like we are stuck on a plantation. But that Kanye was speaking to that, and on that I agree with him absolutely. And I think if he can wake up other blacks to this idea, you're no longer on the plantation. You are actually free, and you can do something. You have the ability of the power, and you have the resources to do something amazing with your life. I think that's a good thing, and I think we should get behind him on that.
I agree, but on the plantation language, I got to say, okay, so you said, bro, what are you still doing on there? I'm wondering because at minimum you should be living in an apartment, which is nothing like a plantation. But, on when we look on par for blacks in America, many millions, tens of millions of blacks live in single family homes, and there are no white people in their home, to be the owner, because a plantation needs an owner. So there's just no correlation. There's just none. No one's lived. Everyone has a car. Everyone has air conditioning. Nothing about that era still exists today for the bulk of Americans, except, obviously we have extreme poverty in certain areas of the country, but for most blacks, air conditioning, dishwashers, and talking cars are the norm. So,
No, absolutely. Unless you're in New York City, which I lived in for a little bit, and then you don't get dishwashers because for some reason they're still behind in the 1950s. But everywhere except for that city, you're absolutely right. And there is this mentality. I think that you said there is no resemblance to slavery and nothing from that era still exists today. I think you're right, except for in as much as the mentality that is prevalent on the Democrat side, which is, a slavish mentality.
What I'm interested in at this point is I'd love to see if there are others who feel empowered by what Kanye has said to come out and be as vocal as he has been. And obviously he doesn't really care because he's so rich. He's so successful. But do you think others will come out? Uh-oh. Okay, I think we lost John. So while my producer...
And the minute you don't need us, we don't need you either.
Okay, you got to repeat that part because I think we missed you. You cut out for a sec.
Sorry. I was just saying that, that the Democrat Party has made it their mission to make blacks completely dependent on them. And that is where the slavish mentality comes from. I think that, you said slavery does not exist and there's no remnants of it in this era, except, I would argue, for the mentality that the Democrat Party has that says that we're going to provide for blacks everything that they need. We're going to make them completely dependent on the government so that they require us, so that they are completely dependent on the services and the benefits we provide them. And then we're going to tell them that the Republicans are responsible for their problems.
Yeah, which I don't even know how that works, because when I look around to who's responsible for my problems, it's not fun when I've made a mistake and then I'm like, well, whose fault is this? And then I realize it's my fault. Usually I don't even have to ask. I'm like, well, I messed this up. Yeah, it's totally me. I made this decision. I followed through with it. I ignored my gut. I didn't pray over this. I just went on with it. And now look at me. And so this is something that happens a lot to us. And it really is a babyish thing, isn't it, John? Isn't it kind of like, it's basically saying to someone, I know you're a grown adult with a job and maybe you have a mortgage and some kids, maybe you're, whatever you've got. But in reality, there's some magical, all-powerful white man, and you can't see him. He's invisible, but he's in control of all the problems in your life, and it's because of racism. And I can't believe there are still people who have synapses firing who buy into that.
No, I completely agree, and I don't know what any honest person who looks at any situation should be able to see that that white person doesn't exist. Who is it? Is it government? Was it Obama underneath Obama? Because Obama, it's not like blacks were doing great under him.
Oh, wow.
So is Obama the great white guy that you're blaming all your problems on? It's completely nonsense. But that's what they're fed, and that's what.
Oh my. We've lost John again. Does anybody? John, can you hear me? Okay, I'm not sure if we lost him or what the deal is. I'm just going to make sure I've got. Okay, perfect. I was just making sure I still had audio going on here. We will try to get John back, but he's fantastic and he's dead on in his assessment of what's happening with and if you're a Democrat.
Kanye was born.
I'm sorry, you cut out. We lost you for like maybe 10, 15 seconds, and I thought maybe you dropped.
Oh, really? I don't know if that's I apologize. I'm on a landline, so I'm going to blame the company, the phone company.
I am too. They don't want conservative thought going out. So I want to give you a chance to wrap it up, though.
Yeah, exactly. They're censoring us.
Yeah, of course they are. Well, I don't think they like my show, but I don't care. So when you're doing your show, when you're breaking down all these topics, what is the point that you want to get out there? And I know it's regardless of race because the truth is the truth, but what are you trying to get out there every day on your program on CRTV and all the work that you do?
Yeah, I think that it is so important now. I focus on, I'm the White House correspondent for CRTV, so, we cover the White House story. each day. But I think that, I'm in the press room, almost on a daily basis. And there are so many stories that are getting out there. And what happens is you get in that press room, and everyone thinks exactly the same. And so it's no wonder that every story that comes out it sounds exactly the same. And all the angles are extremely similar because not enough people are standing up there and saying, no, there's a completely different way to look at this. So, I do my 8-minute segments each day, and I try to get to a different side of the story that's not exactly being told. And, we try to tell it from a limited government standpoint. I think that the uniqueness that we bring to the conversation is that, we are unabashedly conservative. We are unabashedly right-wing, but we base our commentaries in facts. And so, I think that you have to have that to combat, the Jim Acostas of the world and the people who are out there claiming to be objective while spinning the news and giving you lies. I think that it's important for us on the right to come and say, hey, we're giving you the truth.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That's John Miller, White House correspondent for CRTV. We're going to be back with more right after this. Thanks, John.
Collective vision when it comes to our own issues. It's easy for me to see your faults, but when it comes to seeing my own, then my eyesight automatically gets bad. One surefire way to measure new birth in Christ is by opened eyes and a clear vision. Sometimes we can pass between having sight and having no sight because we have fallen asleep to the needs around us, or our perspective on those things that are eternal is distorted. Whatever the case, there is nothing more dangerous than having blurred vision and still thinking that it's clear. Don't measure your vision by your own standards. It will be warped and distorted every time, but rather measure it by God's standards. God desires that our eyesight remains clear. So how is your eyesight today? With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hey, have you called in to share your testimony about how God has been a blessing in your life? If not, what are you waiting for? Share-a-thon is almost here. Stop whatever it is that you're doing and call 877-327-5647. God is too good for us to just sit there and not tell others about his goodness and his mercy. Simply call 877-327-5647. We can't wait to hear from you.
We need you to call your senators today. Tell them to put an end to the liberals' filibuster, switch to a majority vote, and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference. Call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood.
Donald Trump's America.
Last week, a volatile market sent stocks tumbling, but the president said the U.S. economy was still in great shape. Top economic advisor Larry Kudlow on Fox News Sunday echoed that ahead of a new trading week.
Corrections come and go, and people should stay very calm over these things. It's quite normal.
The U.S. also less than a month away from the midterm elections, following an accusation by Vice President Mike Pence that China was seeking to interfere in American democracy at work. Chinese ambassador to the U.S., Sui Tiankai, also on Fox, called the claim groundless.
One of the fundamental principles in China's foreign policy is non-interference in the internal affairs of other countries.
Over the weekend, the president also mentioned during a rally in Kentucky those who were affected by Hurricane Michael. He tweeted late last week that he would travel to Florida and Georgia to see some of the damage this week. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Can I harumph one harumph
Yes,
for
go
you?
ahead.
With my harumph is there are all of these dumb stories that talked about all of the voter registrations that Taylor Swift got with her announcement. You know why there were so many voter registrations? Because it was the last day of voter registration in like 18 states. That would be like if Taylor Swift put an Instagram post on the 15th of April and said, file your taxes. And then everybody said, oh my gosh,
funny.
look at all the tax filings that we saw.
Welcome back to the show. Come on. You know it's true. The same week that voter registration closes in 18 states across the country, all of a sudden Taylor Swift is out there talking about, if you care about your country, you need to vote, and also vote for Democrats. People who were planning on registering to vote had already said, my last day to do it. If you're like me, you set an item in your calendar, and that item reminds you 2 days before or a week before, and then it reminds you the day of, and you got to run out and you got to, push something off to the side if you didn't plan for it, or if it reminded you the day before and you remembered, you're like, while I'm out, I got to do this. Or I have to make sure my registration is in the mail postmarked by this day, or I got to go to my online website, or I have to stop by my polling place, or I have to go to the county office to do my registration. And I think I'm back. I've just connected to the backup Comrex because we're having some problems here. Okay. Can you hear me now? Hi. Welcome back to the program. Check one. I am on the backup Comrex, yes. The one that's called backup. Welcome back to the program. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Research on religion and American life by the Barna Group shows that only 4% of professing Christians actually possess a Christian worldview. The Barna Group asked the following questions to determine whether or not a Christian worldview is present. Do absolute moral truths exist? Does the Bible define absolute truth? Did Jesus Christ live a sinful life? Is God the all-powerful and all-knowing creator of the universe, and does he still rule it today? Is salvation a gift from God that cannot be earned? Is Satan real? Does a Christian have a responsibility to share his or her faith in Christ with other people? Is the Bible accurate in all of its teachings? The correct answer to all of these questions is yes. Do you agree? If not, you do not have a Christian worldview. Instead of going through the motions, let's use our lives to honor and serve God by living out a biblically sound Christian worldview in every avenue of our lives. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at staceyontheright.com.
I stopped the car in the middle of the road, ran over to one of the gentlemen. I says, we could really use your help. There's just my husband and I and nobody else. He said, I'd love to, but boy, we're really backed up. I couldn't help it. I started crying, and he says, we'll be there. With God's work, we will be there. And you came.
8 Days of Hope could use your help in New Bern, North Carolina.
Everyone that's flooded needs the same help we do, and the people can't do it themselves, and we appreciate all that any of y'all could come and do and be a part of this.
Come be the hands and feet of Jesus with 8 Days of Hope. Visit 8daysofhope.com.
Please call them. Please get in touch with 8 Days of Hope. They'll put you to work, and I tell you, it'll mean a lot to not just the people that you're helping, but to yourself.
8daysofhope.com.
This is Stacey on the Right with Stacey Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. We had a little bit of technical difficulties there. Not on my end this time, so anyway, live radio. It's good to be back with you. We can take some calls. Hopefully that's going to be good to go. The call lines are open at 866-963-2037. We normally take calls during this last segment of this hour. 866-963-2037. 866-963-2037. So I want to give you guys there's this huge kind of big deal, and it is this. So you've got our new Supreme Court Justice, Associate Justice Kavanaugh, and he's on the Supreme Court, and we don't currently have on the docket, as far as I know, and you have to go to SCOTUS blog. Just type in SCOTUS blog, and it comes up, and it kind of is a blog about the Supreme Court of the United States. It's very nonpartisan, so you can read it and see what cases are up and who's arguing what and everything like that. And as far as I know, they're not currently on the docket any cases that would challenge the constitutionality of Roe v. Wade. But apparently Planned Parenthood really feels like a conservative court is going to get it done. And you know what I have to say at this one time, because I have yet to find anything that I compliment Planned Parenthood on, it's this. They have a lot of faith in our legislators. They have a lot of faith in our Supreme Court. They have a lot of faith in people trying to get stuff done. It's what they would do. If the Supreme Court had said that abortion was unconstitutional and they got a 5-4 majority on the court, the first thing they would do is put a case forward to try to get abortion ruled as constitutional. They absolutely would not stop until they got that done while they had the numbers. So that's what they think the conservatives are going to do. And I hope they're right. Honestly, I hope they're right. So they've unveiled this multi-million-dollar plan to protect and expand abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned. She says, it's Dawn Leguins, the executive vice president of Planned Parenthood, said there's no way to sugarcoat it. With Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, we'll likely see further erosion and perhaps complete reversal of Roe v. Wade. But Planned Parenthood is not going to let this be a country where people don't have access to abortion. And if the decision is overturned, states will have the power to individually determine whether abortion is legal and whether there are any restrictions. And their report is called Care for All, a 3-part plan to protect and expand access to abortion in the United States. And they take a 3-pronged approach targeting access to health care, policy, and culture change. So, yeah. Anyway. All right, let's go to the phones. We've got Nate in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hey, Nate. Thanks for calling the show today.
Yeah, hi, Stacey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Welcome to the show.
All right. Hey, it's Stacey. I listening to your last caller talking about racism in America, and I wondered, have you seen the movie Free State of Jones?
No.
It's based on a true story about a guy who ends up fighting to save black people that are slaves back during the Civil War times. And he was actually a Confederate soldier. Anyway, at a certain point in the movie, you really should see the movie. It's a great movie. Things happen in America to where blacks can now vote. The North won the war. Yankees won the war. So the blacks march through town to go vote. And when they go in the town hall to vote, and of course all the people are staring them down, a bunch of white people staring them down that are racist, I'm sure, at the time. And they go in to vote, and they ask for Republican tickets. And they almost didn't get them. And they gave them the Republican tickets, and then after that, they cast their vote, and that's when the movie went into Ku Klux Klan stuff that was going on. And they ended up hanging some black people. It was the Ku Klux Klan. Well, those Ku Klux Klan people were all the Democrats in the movie. So it just gets me thinking that somewhere along the lines, the Democrats figured out that we obviously can't hang black people anymore. So how do we get our way and get, quote unquote, get rid of them or whatever they want to do? So they get black people to believe that they're right somewhere along the lines in the history of our country. And now, they're the biggest ones supporting Planned Parenthood and abortion. And I don't know all those statistics, but I think a lot of black people or a lot of black babies are aborted out of all the babies in America.
Yeah, largest
So I don't know.
percentage-wise.
I just wanted to drop that thought.
So what's the name of the movie again?
Free State of Jones.
Free State of Jones. Okay, thank
Matthew
you.
McConaughey. Matthew McConaughey is the star in it. Yep.
Oh, really? He's an awesome actor. Free State of Jones. Okay. Thank you, Nate. I appreciate that movie tip and your comments. Thank you for calling and sharing that with us. Kevin in Pocahontas, Arkansas. Hey, thanks for calling the show today, Kevin.
Yes, Stacey.
Hey.
Stacey, thank you for taking my call. I just want to say I love y'all's program. And for one, I'm a white male. And as far as the last gentleman that was talking, everyone has to own their own life. If the government's not responsible for my life, my happiness, I own my own life. My background is I was a delinquent. I was from a family of a single-parent home. My mother had left my father for another man with 8 kids. And so I grew up in abject poverty. And I had spent over 4 years and 3 months in state prisons by the time I was 21, not to include reform school. And whenever God finally got a hold of my life, I realized I had to do something myself. I owned my own life, and I picked myself up from out of that state of depravity, of moral depravity, as well as poverty. And I turned my life around. I became a minister. I worked in funeral service for 24 years. I mean, I became a responsible person with my life, a Christian, you know. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, and it wasn't that I was just white and I had privilege. I wasn't. I was a poor white person, you know. And I've done something with my life. I owned it. And that's what I hear from you. And you know, as a Christian, you have to own your life, you know. And your character is only changed through Christ. You know?
Amen. You can't do it yourself.
I just want to. No. He changes your nature. Mm-hmm. You know, my nature had to be changed from that delinquency and from that depravity, and from out of that, my life turned around. And it was other Christians also that reached out to me, you know, and saw something in me, you know, other than just my criminality, you know. And but anyhow, I just want to say that you're a great addition to the afternoon programming, and I absolutely love your programming, and I love, just like that young man there, you know, I love what he had to say, you know.
Thank you.
Very clear. Very clear.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for calling and sharing your testimony and your history there. I wanted to point out, because Kevin said it wasn't white privilege for him. It was he literally said, I'm changing. I'm not going to stay this way. And then he plugged in, and God sent help. You know, because we need help. That's what all this humanity is about. It's us helping each other. We're the hands and feet of Christ. We had a funny interaction this weekend at our house. Kind of dovetails in with what Kevin was just saying about privilege, and John Miller mentioned it too during his interview. And I have to say, you know, John Miller's excellent. You should find him and his content online on Facebook. They have the 8-minute videos that he does every day. You can watch him there. If you're a Facebook user, if you're not, you know what? I get it. I get what you're putting down there. So this weekend, our son went to do an activity at a local business, and some people from his school were going and they were filming. They asked him to come along and be a part of the little project that they were working on for school. He went, and it was about like an hour and a half that he was gone, and maybe 2 hours. And he came back, and so we're, you know, this is Saturday. On Sunday, we're sitting there eating dinner, you know, in the kitchen, and we're chatting. And he says, oh, by the way, that business offered me a job. So the story is, our son, who's 17, has been working at a local business here, a fast food restaurant, and he's been working there for a few months, since like almost the beginning of the summer. But he's been offered now 3 other jobs since he started working there, and he doesn't have to quit his fast food job to work these other jobs. And so when he said it, I mean, if you listen to the show more than once, you know me. I was like, oh man, that must be your black privilege, huh? And he broke out laughing, and he was like, that's right, Mom. My black privilege. I'm constantly getting asked to work for people. And the reason he's getting asked to work is not because he has black privilege. He is black, but it's not that. It's that he does a good job when he shows up. He's very proactive. He's a good worker, and he has a good attitude, and he speaks the Queen's English, if you know what I mean. So none of that, you know, what they called ebonics, which is just another word for shibboleth. He doesn't do that. And so I'm pointing that out and dovetailing in with our callers, and really fantastic comments from Nate and Kevin and John Miller to say that there are certain innate benefits to being anyone here in America, and there are certain drawbacks. But it's all about the work that you put in and whether or not you're willing to, hey, I need help. God help me. Let me commit myself to you so you can work these things out for me. And I'm going to work hard and rely on you. If you're leaving us now, God bless you. Good night from the Heartland. If you're staying with us, stick around for more news and information from onenewsnow.com.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk is that alternative radio network because we choose to infuse Jesus in everything we do.
We count it a blessing to be able to speak with integrity and to speak honestly on the issues.
Thank you for joining us, partnering with us, being a part of
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk, so that we can stand for the gospel.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. One of only 2 men to be convicted of involvement in planning the 9/11 attacks could soon be free. Fox's Simon Owen reports from London.
Pictures emerging in Germany showing Munir al-Motassadegh, blindfolded and shackled, being moved from a prison as Germany prepares to deport him to his native Morocco. Motassadegh was convicted of helping organise the September 11th attacks as a member of an al-Qaeda cell in Hamburg, Germany, that also contained 3 of the suicide pilots who hijacked planes. Motassadegh has served most of a 15-year sentence. His fate in Morocco is unknown. In London, Simon Owen, Fox News.
A joint Saudi-Turkish team has entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to search it nearly 2 weeks after the disappearance of a Saudi journalist. The team arrived Monday afternoon to the consulate in Istanbul's upscale 4th Levant neighborhood. It's unclear what kind of search the officials will conduct and if it will involve forensics, especially since the journalist disappeared on October 2nd. Meanwhile, President Trump is suggesting that rogue killers may be responsible for whatever happened to him. Search and rescue efforts continue in a Florida town destroyed by Hurricane Michael. Fox's Mike Tobin is in Mexico Beach, where dozens of people remain unaccounted for.
Unaccounted for doesn't mean they're necessarily buried in the debris. These are people that they just simply have not been able to contact since the hurricane. And that gets you to the subject of communications. Officials in Bay County are now complaining bitterly about the communications and the reestablishment of the communications.
The Storm Relief Ministry 8 Days of Hope is still assisting victims of Hurricane Florence in North Carolina, not to mention people still in need after Hurricane Harvey in 2017. Even so, that's not stopping 8 Days of Hope President and Executive Director Steve Tiber. Speaking today on AFR's Today's Issues program, Tiber said the ministry will soon be helping Hurricane Michael victims in Florida.
I will be headed to Panama City Beach tomorrow. I'll be there all day. We're going to put the final details together. But we believe by Thursday, Friday of this week, a volunteer could go to our website, 8daysofhope.com. We're going to step out in faith and purchase some additional equipment because we have 31 major pieces of equipment, and all 31 right now are either in North Carolina, in Houston, or en route to Florida. So we're going to step out in faith.
8 Days of Hope began in 2005 after Hurricane Katrina. Sears filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection today with plans to shutter 142 unprofitable stores in the hopes that it can stay in business. The question now is whether a smaller version of the company that once towered over the American retail landscape can be viable. Sears, which started as a mail-order catalog in the 1880s, has been on a slow march toward extinction as it lagged far behind its peers and incurred huge losses over the years. Meanwhile, retail sales for the month of September came in at a disappointing 0.1%. Expectations were for 0.6%, And Dan Celia Financial Issue says this was the second month in a row for a low number.
This is headed into a very busy season, so that leads some concern. So maybe last season was just an anomaly, a one-off kind of thing after a couple of years of a freeze in retail sales, and maybe we're going to get right back to it.
Americans spent less at restaurants, grocery stores, and gas stations in September. In final news this hour, Facebook may be getting closer to debuting an unsend messages feature. Fox's Kristen Goodwin explains.
Currently, folks can only delete messages from their own inbox. The unsend feature would allow users to remove a message from both sides of a conversation. Other platforms like Snapchat and Facebook's Instagram already allow users to unsend messages. While the social network hasn't revealed any dates, a rep for the company tells TechCrunch, Facebook internally tests products and features before they ship to the public so we can ensure the quality of the experience.
That's all our time for this hour. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Victory Macintosh.
Early will I seek thee, O Lord. Man, it's something about when you start your morning off right with Abba, Father. I'm telling you, will the enemy come? Of course, he's going to do his job. But it should motivate you even more. Man, I got to stay connected to the vine of Jesus. How do you do that? By getting into the Word of God. You got to do it.
Tune in to Word on the Street with Victory Macintosh. Saturdays at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Rod Rosenstein okayed the final FISA warrant. I mean, that FISA warrant to spy on Carter Page was re-upped 3 times, and the final one was given the green light by Rod Rosenstein.
Bruce Orr's wife was working for the opposition. Glenn Simpson was certainly working for the opposition. And Michael Zussman, the lawyer, Perkins Coie, was the key lawyer for the Democrat National Committee and the Clinton campaign. And yet, the document that was put together, this dossier, was what was used to go to the secret court to get a warrant to go spy on the other campaign. Well, that is never supposed to happen in this country, but it did.
You know, the same folks that prejudged Hillary Clinton's innocence, prejudged Donald Trump's guilt, and the same names are the same folks whose conduct is at issue with respect to how evidence was presented or not presented to the FISA court.
And now, Stacey Washington.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us. In this hour, we are going to be speaking to Professor Warren Threadgold. He's a St. Louis University professor. He has a new book out, The University We Need, Reforming American Higher Education. That's a super important interview for us because, as we've seen, we have more conservative professors retiring than are being hired, and this is a yearly occurrence. And so with that comes a continued march towards totalitarianism and the refusal to acknowledge that more than one viewpoint exists. So we're going to be speaking with the professor about his book and about what can be done to reverse this trend. It really means that even though we greatly respect higher education and as parents and as Americans, we want to see as many people as possible who are, that's their calling to get that higher education, to go and get it because it benefits our country. But if a higher educational advanced degree, if going for that loses its intrinsic value due to the fact that the majority of it is kind of trending towards indoctrination, and that these young adults are coming out with these worthless, it's a piece of paper that doesn't get them anywhere. A degree in gender studies, African American studies. I don't know anybody who has a degree in that who's gainfully employed and really moving up a progressive ladder for their profession. Now, people who have degrees in science, biology, chemistry, physics, people who have degrees in mathematics, people who have degrees in professional pursuits like business, and people who have MBAs, they seem to be doing very well. People who get law degrees, who get medical degrees, who get degrees in the veterinary medical field, they also do very well. But there's a continuation. It's like, you can almost guarantee that if a person says, I went to college, but I also work at Starbucks. If you ask them what they got their degree in, they're going to say, oh, well, women's studies. That's a shame, because that degree costs the same amount of money, if not more, than the degree for the person who went for engineering. And engineering graduates step out into jobs paying around $50,000, $60,000, and $70,000. That's the range. They start off making that big money because they're in demand, number one, and number two, they have a marketable skill that doesn't go away. A degree in engineering doesn't become obsolete. And they get to work for these big companies that have benefits, and really it's a great start out in life. And it's not the only thing that matters, obviously. The main goal for us here at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk is that we want to get people to see that it's life in Christ that is the ultimate benefit. But we also have to eat and pay rent or mortgages and, get clothes on our backs and shoes and things like that. And the easiest way to do that is to put the hard work in first. And if you're not going into a trade, so you can become a plumber, electrician, carpentry, construction, which are all admirable professions, and those people do very well. Then if you're going for a degree in higher education, a degree in English literature, if you're going to teach English literature, fantastic. But if you're just getting a degree in English literature and you don't have any plans for what to do with it afterwards, if you're not going into the profession, how does that work out for you? And it's our job as parents to tell people that. And so now I want to pivot over to immigration. And I talked about this a little bit in hour one. This is classic Claire McCaskill. She always becomes much more conservative and much more concerned about conservative issues when it's election season. And we have extended an invitation for her to come on here so we can talk about this. So this isn't for a lack of trying to have her come on this program. Here she is at the Senate, and she's grandstanding on illegal immigration. And why, you might ask? Because this is an issue that moves voters, and she wants people to think that she's on the right side of it, when in reality, I'm going to unpack it for you once we listen to this. She's part of the problem here. She's part of the reason why we can't get these people arrested and why we don't have the bed space. It's number 4.
I just got to tell you, our country has watched, had a front row seat, where we have detained a lot of people, children even, that are not a threat to our country. I don't think most people in my state would understand why prioritizing suspected terrorists has not happened. To me, the most important job we have is to be deporting criminals that are violating our laws and hurting people, making sure we arrest the criminals that are in this country illegally, that are violating the law, and detaining people who are suspected terrorists. And I would like, Secretary Nielsen, for you to report back to this committee how you intend on getting all these suspected terrorists detained as quickly as possible.
So here's the problem with what she's saying. As a senator, she advocates for not sealing the southern border. So if you want to have fewer people who are crossing illegally and taking up bed space, then you seal the southern border. Once you seal the southern border, you implement E-Verify. That could be done at the same time. Once E-Verify is 100% implemented, meaning it's the law of the land and it's enforced, then you have fewer people here who can find work, and so they self-deport. Now you have much more bed space, and instead of having new bed spaces created for family units, you can detain those 2,500 terrorists. In fact, if it were me, and I have no idea how this works, because every time someone tries to do something common sense, every time the president says, I'm going to take this common sense measure on immigration, some wacky court will say, you can't do that. You don't have the power to do that. We know you're the president, but we're the courts. We're the appellate courts, not even the Supreme Court. We're the appellate courts. I would say everyone who's in a detention facility is immediately offered permanent jail time or deportation. So you're reconnected with your family unit, as it's called, and you are instantly taken back to your home country. And if you return again, it's jail time. And your child will be deported back to home country. And then however many of those you have to execute to empty up the bed space to detain either for deportation or for criminal proceedings, those who are suspected terrorists. You should be able to clear 2,500 beds out for that in no time. Just like that. Boom, done. What next? But instead, we have Claire McCaskill grandstanding and sitting around sounding, didn't she just sound so logical and so, you're like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you're right. Why are we detaining family units at the border? We're detaining them because there's a surge. Honduras has a surge that's going on. There's another group of people who are making a new caravan to get to the southern border of the United States. Because if it worked for those other caravans, why shouldn't it work for them? This is what we're talking about. People are honestly interested in getting here because they know once they're here, our laws are so lax, there's just, welcome on in. We just bought a new sofa. Come and try it out. We can't kick you out of the house, so we might as well have you come in and, how many of you are there? I got to make for dinner. I got to prepare dinner. That's what we're doing right now. And understand that it has so little to do with the race of the people. I would feel the same if the majority of the people surging our border were from Haiti or some Caribbean country. I would feel the same if they were Europeans. It's not about their country of origin. It's that we don't have people to take care of the people who are coming here. So they're going on our social services, and it's straining our budgets. So there are some people who are trying to do something. Over in the House, Republican leader McCarthy filed a bill called Build the Wall. It's number 1.
The name of this bill is Build the Wall, Enforce the Law. So it fully funds the wall at $25 billion, but it even does more. Kate's Law, which we passed, is a part of this. Stops sanctuary cities. It keeps children safe because it removes the MS-13 gang members. And it denounces this movement like in San Francisco that allows illegals to vote in our election. But I watched what McConnell just said today. He said we're going to have a vigorous fight over the wall in December. And watching what this Senate was able to do with Kavanaugh, I believe this gives them the opportunity and the time to get this done once and for all.
Wouldn't that be great? So what I'm annoyed with is that when the Democrats are in charge, they obviously don't want to do anything on immigration. When they have all 3 houses of government, they don't do anything on it because it's such a terrible issue for them because they've really put themselves in between a rock and a hard place. But Republicans don't have that problem. It may be, quote unquote, unpopular in the polls. And remember, the polls are whatever the pollster is making them out to be. And am I saying that all of these polling organizations are dishonest and corrupt? No. But I am saying that if I want to get a poll together about people who listen to this show, and I want to find people who love this show, or people who are going to say they've been listening for a long time or they're new listeners and it's fantastic, there are ways to craft the questions to get that. When the reality is, I know that, I think I put on a fantastic show, but I also get email from people who tell me that they hate it and they criticize it. I don't get a lot of that email, but I do get some. I also get email from people who say, I'm never listening to your show. They never should have put you on. I get those. And some of the emails that I get is just actually only been 2, where the person says, at the bottom it says in Christ, but above that is nothing like what a Christian would write. But I can tell you a competent pollster can get a number of people together. They can poll 1,300, a decent number of people, and they could find enough of them to say anything you want to say about the show. Someone who hates the show could find a number of people to poll to find that no one likes the show. So the nature of polling is that if you keep going, you can get something along the lines of what you're looking for, unless you're just looking for something, absolutely ludicrous. But when it comes to liking or disliking something, the way you frame the question plays a lot of that. It plays into that role. So when we hear people saying to the Republican Party, the Republicans are unpopular on immigration, no, actually 64% of all Americans believe that the southern border should be sealed. 64%. And a significant plurality of Americans believe that if you are here in the country illegally, that you should be made to abide by the law. If you frame the question as such that, do you want people who don't obey the law or do you want people who do obey the law? should certain groups of people be able to evade the law while you are forced to obey it, you get an even higher percentage. Over 80% of people will say everyone should have to follow the law the same. Then if you say it's about immigration, it'll drop a little bit. But if you say, you know, if you're in the country illegally and you should be able to stay here or should you be deported, most people will say the person should be deported. Now, if you start asking kids, well, what if you have children who are crying, or what if you have a child who's sick, or what if you have a child who needs a surgery here, then the wishy-washy people will say, well, for that family, they should get to stay, but everyone else should get deported. And you know this is true because when you talk to the man in the street interviews, when you talk to people individually yourself, only very, very wealthy people who have absolutely zero chance of interacting with illegal immigrants or being a victim of illegal immigrant crime are the ones who say, nope, it's not biblical. Everyone should get to stay. And hardcore activists, leftists, they're the ones, yeah. And when you call people on it, people who are Christians, people who vote for Democrats, they'll say, well, I don't really agree with Democrats' immigration policy, but I agree on their social policy, so I'm sticking with the Democrats. So it's more about ideology and being an identified member of a group, meaning being a Democrat as an identity, than it is agreeing with the policies that they espouse. And I've never met anyone who could explain to me why illegal immigration is the one area of the law where certain people shouldn't have to obey it and everyone else has to. No one can answer that. So the Republicans should get on the stick and make this happen. Who cares what the polls say? We'll be back with more right after this. Stay there.
Are you still stuck on the healthcare roller coaster? Still paying those high premiums? And strapped into huge deductibles? Not knowing what's around the next turn? Well, then let me tell you about a sound, sensible healthcare choice that really is affordable. It's MediShare, the healthcare sharing solution people like you have been trusting in for more than 25 years. MediShare members report saving around $500 a month on their healthcare costs, and they never pay for things they don't believe in. Time to say goodbye to that healthcare roller coaster and say hello to MediShare.
Call *** 345 to find out how much you can save on your healthcare. MediShare. Call *** 345. Message and data rates may apply. That's ** 345.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Caldwell Swice admits that reaching your secular friends with the gospel is difficult, but there are things we can do to be more effective. He and I have worked together at the International Society of Christian Apologetics, so I was excited to see many commentators like Ed Stetzer and Eric Metaxas quoting him. Caldwell says we make a mistake when we ignore the trends and zeitgeist of the times, and we make grave mistakes when we try to stereotype people into this or that category. Sometimes the best starting point is to ask a question. When someone tells him that they don't believe in God, he asks, "What God do you not believe in?" He says that 9 times out of 10, it is usually a God that we Christians don't believe in. He has 3 principles we should adopt so that we can be more effective in reaching our secular friends. First, we must engage. He says we should sit at the table where we have the attention of your secular friends. Connect with them by getting involved with Apple computers, with Congress, or with sports. We'll be more effective if we sit at the table where most decisions are made by government, culture, media, and education. Second, we must inquire. That means we need to turn the table to listening and asking good questions. The Bible admonishes us to let your speech always be gracious and seasoned with salt. He tells of a student who told him that he did not believe in anything that is not physical. Khaldun asked him if his idea was physical. After all, not believing in anything that is non-physical is a non-physical idea. Third, we should edify. That means we should reach across the table and learn to love people redemptively. The gospel is ultimately about relationships, and we can demonstrate the truth of the gospel through love. These principles will help you be more effective in reaching your secular friends. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being here today. We are so excited to have our next guest on the program. First time on the show. He is the author of The University We Need, Reforming American Higher Education. It's Professor Warren Threadgold, and he is a professor at St. Louis University, which is in my town. It's called SLU around here by us locals. Thank you, Professor, for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
So let's talk about this book. I read the blurbs and the synopsis, and I was like, wow, very timely, very, very important. Why'd you write it?
Well, I wrote it because things have gotten pretty bad in most American universities, and I don't just mean SLU, my own university, I mean all of them. It's getting to be to the point where a Christian and a conservative is very much endangered if he's a faculty member, and isn't very comfortable if he's a student either on most campuses.
So what does that look like? What does it, because I've seen the stories, you know, I'm pretty aware of it, but like at SLU, because we went to SLU, we actually visited SLU earlier this year. It was very much earlier in the year, like January, February, we did a tour. And as we were going around the campus, it was so gorgeous. Your campus has really, over the time that we've lived in St. Louis for the past 20 years, the campus has not only grown in size, but the actual buildings themselves and the amenities have been renovated, and it's just every building is more beautiful than the next. It's a pretty good-sized campus, large student body, and you have a number of housing options that we just adored. But we noticed immediately upon entering freshman dorms that there are a lot of, like, this is your pronoun, put your pronouns on the door. There was a board all about, you know, you don't mispronoun someone, that type of stuff. And we noticed that in the dorms immediately. And we saw some, you know, transgendered students on the campus walking around. And so these are all freedom issues, obviously. But there is a kind of culture on SLU's campus where if you don't buy into the misgendering, the different pronouns and all of that stuff, you're kind of setting yourself up for some disaster.
Yes, I'm afraid it's all true. I've seen the campus change. I've been there 20 years as well, and certainly they've upgraded the campus in all sorts of ways, but their idea of their mission is one that really an Orthodox Catholic like myself is not comfortable with. And yet that's what they're teaching the students, and that's the way they're evaluating the faculty. Now, it's a big thing for determining our salaries whether you're contributing to the mission of the university, and the mission of the university is, well, all of this inclusiveness, diversity, which of course means that you exclude conservatives, and conservatives aren't part of diversity. What you do is you try to make people feel comfortable if they're transgendered, if they're homosexual, if they're, well, I mean, you know the whole list.
Yeah, it's depressing because can you just talk to us from the professor's standpoint? How much of that is adding to the quality of the education at SLU or detracting from it?
Well, essentially, if you believe in all the latest left-wing dogma, you can say it in the classroom. If you don't, you're supposed to keep quiet. And that's pretty much the case for students, too, who really are I think, afraid to speak their minds in the classroom if they don't say the things that they're expected to say. Now, of course, you can have the complete illusion of freedom if you believe all the dogma that the left-wing administration and the left-wing ideology of the campus wants you to. But look, I do want to make it very clear that SLU is no different from most campuses and, in fact, is better than some of them. This is a nationwide problem. It's not just SLU.
Yeah, and I want to echo that. One of the things that we noticed, in addition to the pronouns and all of that stuff, was that everyone that we encountered on the campus was very positive, very kind. In fact, one of the primary reasons why it didn't end up being a place that my daughter seriously considered was just simply the number of students there. She was looking for a smaller campus and a smaller student body size. And obviously, we live in the suburbs of St. Louis, and you know what, Professor? She just didn't want to be in the same. She wanted to move away. She was like, I have to at least move out of St. Louis. Come on, Mom. I've grown up here, but lived here my whole life. So those were two strikes against SLU. But we have another couple that we know and love dearly. Their child is going there and loving it. And I know people who've graduated from there. I don't think SLU is at the tippy top of, kind of the social justice campuses, and you can still get a great education there. But it is concerning, the things you outline in your book. Can you share a little bit of what you see as kind of a normative process going across universities across the country that are detracting from the educational value?
Well, of course, there are some things that aren't ideological that are detracting from educational value, too. And those are things like grade inflation. Courses are getting easier and easier. And if you look for the easiest courses, and it's not hard to find them on most campuses, there's even a website that helps you find them called ratemyprofessors.com. If you want a class in which you don't even have to go to the classes, in which you have almost no reading to do, in which you have almost no writing to do, it's easy to find one. And you can still get good grades for such things. And professors are encouraged, actually, to do that because they get good teaching ratings from their students who say, what a great class, it's so easy. And, of course, it's less, it is less work for us, too, if we don't have to grade papers, if we don't have to ask students questions, if we just show up and maybe the classroom is half full, but that's not a problem for us either. And this is happening nationwide, no question about it. And it's a problem that has nothing to do with ideology. But as for discussing ideas, you can discuss whether you're soft left or hard left, but you can't really discuss the whole spectrum. You certainly can't discuss things from a Christian perspective in most universities, and it's pretty hard to discuss them from a Catholic perspective, even in a Catholic university like SLU.
So I know it's because some of the professors just don't want to hear it, but it's also the students. Even if a professor is open to hearing the viewpoints that you just outlined that are kind of not mainstream anymore, Christianity, fundamental Catholicism, and the entire right side of the political spectrum, isn't it the students who are kind of driving these protests and these kind of crazy, like, you can't speak on our campus, even if we're not forced to see you, you just can't even walk on our campus, that type of stuff?
Well, of course, it is students, but it's not the majority of students. This is a small group of very vocal students. But since the administration favors them, and it is at least afraid to oppose them, the majority of students, who I think don't really agree with this, are intimidated. And I don't know what the majority of students think. They're very passive. They don't feel like speaking out, that's for sure. But, they could say that I don't feel like speaking out. Most of my students have no idea that I'm a conservative. And every now and then I let slip that I'm a Catholic, which is acceptable. They might think I'm a very liberal Catholic.
You let a few people in on the fact that you're Catholic.
Yes, well, I do occasionally refer to it in class. I think I can get away with that. But being a conservative, I never say.
So what's the answer? Because I believe you when you say it's a small number of people who are very vocal, and they're like the worst kid at the airport, where the entire airport from one wing to the other can hear this kid screaming and kicking, and that kid's making all the other kids look terrible. The kids who are just sitting with their little iPads doing nothing or quietly reading a book are getting a bad rap because of this one kid. It's kind of similar with these crazed activist kids on campus, but what's the answer?
Well, I have myself been thinking about this for a long time. I don't think it does very much good for one person to speak up on these campuses, because they're just a tiny minority, and it's really out of the picture that they should help. You notice that the controversy is mostly about outside speakers. It's because there aren't any voices on the campus anymore who are conservative and Christian. And that's not right. Very liberal Christian speakers can speak at a place like St. Louis University. They might have trouble at some other places. So I don't really know. I've suggested in my book that what we need is a new university, but we don't need it probably for people like your daughter who want a smaller college. There are several small colleges And if we could just have one university that was in that class that was explicitly conservative and Christian, or I've suggested Christian and Orthodox Jewish, it would be an enormous help to the whole academic landscape nationwide. And that's one of the things I propose in my book.
So do you see any opportunity for students themselves? Because I believe the bulk of the students on campus are either kind of apolitical because they find college to be so overwhelming. They're not taking the easier classes. They're really working hard and they just want to get their degree. And so during their college years, they're not as political. They just don't feel the need to be so. And then there's also kids there who are clearly right-leaning. They may not be full-blown Stacey on the right types, but they're definitely conservative, politically, maybe even socially. Is it time for them to band together and have some protests and kind of show the other people what it looks like, or is that an exercise in futility?
I don't think it would work. There aren't enough of them. There isn't enough sympathy for them among the student body at large, and the administration is against them. I just don't see. They'd have to have some very specific cause, and I can imagine if they chose it very carefully, it might do a little bit of good, but I wouldn't do very much good. It wouldn't change the overwhelming fact that administrations are very left-wing and very anti-Christian. Faculties are by and large left-wing and anti-Christian. And the people who aren't as left-wing and aren't as anti-Christian are passive and have learned that you just get in trouble if you speak.
So I do agree with that. If you go to Campus Reform, they have a website where they just catalog this, and it's a constant, all the time type of a situation. So what's the answer for parents? Because I also think there's some room for people who are alumni who are conservative to say, you know what, I'm not going to give you any more money. Would that impact it at all?
Oh, I think it should happen. And one of the reasons why I think a new conservative university could succeed is it would give people a place to give their money, whereas now they either don't give money to higher education at all, or they're giving money to mostly institutions that are selling a message that they absolutely don't approve of. And I'm sorry that so many of them still do. Of course, the really big donors get the idea that what they want their names to be on is a building at Harvard or something like that, and they don't really care what's taught inside it seems, or they haven't thought about it. That's probably more what really is what's on their mind. They just don't think about that. And slowly they're learning that these are universities that really regard America as a terribly oppressive place. And part of the reason that they're finding this out is that this now has some traction in the National Democratic Party, that America is an oppressive place. We're all racist, we're all homophobes, we're all transgender phobes, we're all really bad people. And that's what the university's been teaching for a long time, and finally it's beginning to penetrate on the national political scene, too.
Okay. So I have to ask about this new conservative university. You're not talking about starting one of those in St. Louis. You mean a nationwide kind of a university where there would be campuses across the country and that would be a viable option for parents to send their kids to, a place where conservative professors could work and that type of thing? What does this look like?
Well, if you really want to find a conservative college, there are several of them. There are places like Berea College and Christendom College and Grove City College and Hillsdale College. Those places exist, and they are places where you can send your children if you don't want them to get the full liberal propaganda machine. You won't find them there. The place that I proposed would be a single campus, because the trouble with these multiple campuses, and I've been in a number of universities that have multiple campuses, they just have no focus and they have no impact. Either there's one campus that's the real campus and the other ones really are fake campuses and too small and don't make any difference, or they spread themselves too thin. The proposal that I make, and I make a very specific proposal, but it's one that certainly could be modified. Anyone who has the money to do it can found such a university and doesn't have to listen to me if he doesn't want to. I suggested one in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., since it would be near the center of political power and in a position to have real national influence, and that could attract conservative students and professors from all over the country. But I'd hope it would have national impact. It wouldn't just be a local university that would just draw from people from around Washington, because, of course, a whole lot of students, including me when I was that age, are like your daughter, and they'd rather live away from home and be independent.
Well, I'm hoping that what we need is people who have those big dollars to take this idea on and band together and start something like this, because we need more Hillsdales. We need more, not less. I mean, we don't have them spread out around the country. We need a conservative university in the Midwest, really strong one besides Wheaton. So thank you so much. Professor Warren Threadgold, professor at St. Louis University, Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars Fellowship, Wilbur Foundation Fellowship, an amazing career. Thank you, sir, for coming on today. We'll be right back.
Hi, guys. This is Lewis Walker from Newport News, Virginia. I'd just like to say that this has been a tremendous blessing in my life because it has reshaped and reformed the way that I lead my family in worship. It makes me think about world issues through a biblical lens, which I never even thought about growing up. And it's helped me keep my family more Christ-centered and oriented in order to share the gospel accurately and more compassionately. Thank you so much for what you do. I pray that God will strengthen you and continue to provide the funds to be able to spread the gospel all over the place. Continue to challenge the evil one. We love you guys, and we hope to hear more of you.
Pray for God's blessing on our upcoming Share-a-thon so that we can continue to make a difference. Share-a-thon begins tomorrow here on Urban Family Talk.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. Research on religion and American life by the Barna Group shows that only 4% of professing Christians actually possess a Christian worldview. The Barna Group asked the following questions to determine whether or not a Christian worldview is present. Do absolute moral truths exist? Does the Bible define absolute truth? Did Jesus Christ live a sinful life? Is God the all-powerful and all-knowing creator of the universe, and does he still rule it today? Is salvation a gift from God that cannot be earned? Is Satan real? Does a Christian have a responsibility to share his or her faith in Christ with other people? Is the Bible accurate in all of its teachings? The correct answer to all of these questions is yes. Do you agree? If not, you do not have a Christian worldview. Instead of going through the motions, let's use our lives to honor and serve God by living out a biblically sound Christian worldview in every avenue of our lives. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
The week ahead. President Trump is expected to visit the Florida Panhandle this week after it was ravaged by Hurricane Michael. The Category 4 storm was the strongest to hit the U.S. mainland in more than a quarter century. Tuesday is tip-off for the 2018-2019 NBA season. Teams playing games on back-to-back days is at an all-time low. Wednesday, recreational marijuana use in Canada becomes legal. Roughly 100 dispensaries across the country are expected to be open. Also Wednesday, British Prime Minister Theresa May joins EU leaders in Brussels to discuss Brexit. Officials hope to agree on a final withdrawal treaty with Britain. Friday, Bernie Sanders will be back on the political trail. The Vermont senator kicks off a 9-state tour to campaign for Democratic candidates in the midterm elections. Sanders ran for president in 2016 and is considered a possible contender in 2020. And that's a look at the week ahead. I'm Rich Dennison, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacey on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to speak to Professor Warren Threadgold. He's a professor of history at St. Louis University. I also wanted to give a little bit more information. He actually has a PhD from Harvard University, and he has his bachelor's from Harvard University. He teaches the Byzantine Empire, medieval history to 1100, ancient Greece, ancient and medieval people, introduction to Byzantine history, the Byzantine historians, Byzantine Western relations, and late antiquity. So really someone that I'm sure his students have a ton of fun in his classes learning about these subjects. And I just wish that we had more teachers like him who would have decades left in the field. He says his field is the political, economic, military, social, and cultural history of the Byzantine Empire, years 285 to 1461. Fascinating man. And it was such a pleasure to get to speak with him today. He makes a great point about starting and seeding these new universities. And we got to be willing to do that. And so the best thing for us to do, the absolute best thing for us to do, is for us to spread the word. Any person who is, of any kind of educational background that's in academia, they know how universities get started. And it's not about everybody being super wealthy. It's about saying, some family that has acres, some family that has property, that instead of leaving that land to some already existing university, would say, I'm leaving it to this, we're going to start a new university on this land. I'm leaving it to maybe Liberty University, and then Liberty would start another campus. Although it's interesting that Professor Threadgold said he doesn't really think the multiple campuses works as well as having a standalone university that is really about its own business. But there's a way to get it done. The question is, which of us is going to take that on? Somebody has to. So now I want to turn to the Department of Justice and FBI corruption. So as you might have seen, the president was on 60 Minutes interview over the weekend, and everybody over at Vox and everywhere else is all mad because they say that the interviewer didn't land any points. He was able to answer the questions. He looked good in every segment, as if to say, it's only a good interview if you make President Trump look bad. How about if you just interview him and let Americans make up their own mind about how he looked? So the reason they weren't able to land any punches on him is because President Trump is not guilty of collusion. Now, there may have been some decisions that were unwise made during the campaign by some of the campaign members. There may have been some of the campaign surrogates, staff, volunteers who had things in their past that were iffy, that once they were involved with the campaign made them targets for an investigation. But over at epochtimes.com, they have a detailed infographic of all of the players who were involved in this. And this was nothing short of a political coup. The president at the time, President Obama, was bent in the most hellacious fashion on preventing a Trump presidency. And joining with him in that effort were huge swaths of the intelligence community, the leadership anyway, numerous agencies, the Hillary Clinton campaign, and Fusion GPS, and anyone in Washington, D.C. who didn't want to see this quote-unquote swamp drained. The fact is, they actually didn't think that he was going to win. They thought he'd be a great foil and that Hillary Clinton would vanquish him. She would be the conqueror, and she would literally drive a stake into Donald Trump, and they'd never have to hear from him again or any of his family. Instead, not only did he win, but when he got to Washington, D.C., instead of having lunch with all the special interests and getting taken out to dinner by all the special interests, he was like, I've been to all the best lunch spots. I own the best golf courses. I own wineries, and I own property all over the world. If I want something to look nice, I renovate it and then move into it and make it look nice. I make things nice for myself. I have the best vehicles. I have the best planes. I have the fanciest helicopter. Nothing you have to offer me will induce me to move away from my stated goal that this swamp needs to be drained, because I'm going to leave this Washington, D.C., this city, this government better than I found it. And that is my dad's favorite slogan. It's the slogan of so my dad's an Army veteran. He was a military policeman. And I think it's either the military police or one of the companies that he worked in for years. That was their motto. He had it on a cup, a coffee cup. Leave things better than you find them. It's a way of living. You either believe in that or you don't. And that's for all the people who will push a cart out of the grocery store or the home goods and then put the front wheels of the cart up on the little grassy median and get in their car and drive away, so that a hard wind can blow that cart off and it can go slamming into my minivan. Yeah, That's not leaving things better than you found them. Leaving things better than you found them is at the minimum, you put the cart into the cart return area. And if there isn't a cart return, you simply hit the lock button, walk yourself back over with that cart and put it back inside the front of the store and then go on about your business. Those are just simple leave things better than you found them. But if you want to really go up a notch, it's what Donald Trump is doing. And I know whenever I say this, you know, people who suffer from Trump derangement syndrome are all like, but he hates women. He hates black people. Donald Trump cheated on his wife. Yep. So he's a failed person just like you, just like me. We all have something. You please, while you're suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, don't get too into yourself to the point where you think you don't have anything that you need to be repenting for or that you haven't worked on. My favorite is people who are themselves divorced, who are whining about Donald Trump being divorced. I'm like, but aren't you divorced? I mean, just a second. Did you, haven't you been divorced? I mean, I don't care. Are you judging him for being divorced when you're divorced? Because are you judging him for using profanity? Because I heard you say, you know, it's, of course we all have standards, but I mean, come on. So if the problem really is Trump the person, that means he can never do anything that would please you except to go away. And so that means you're not really in the conversation. That means the rest of us can just talk about it. The rest of us can just go on, you know, dealing with the issues as they stand, which is, you know, the guy's getting a lot done. I mean, he's getting a lot done. The list of accomplishments that the White House sent out a list, and it was pretty awesome. And then other people have running lists that they maintain where if you want to know what the president's been up to, you know, you can check out their list and see. And I gave one of them on the air once, and that was the first time. It was when we first started doing the show on American Family Radio, the first hour, and I had so many people reach out and say, where can I find that list? And I had it emailed to me, and it was one of the White House lists, and so I just was able to email the emailed list to people. But I mean, I didn't have a source for it like a blog because it was just a compilation of different news stories. They were all news story headlines. The fact is, we've got a situation where corruption is running amok in Washington, D.C. And like the professor pointed out, if this were on the other foot, if the shoe were on the other foot and Republicans had literally stood up a multi-pronged operation spanning all of the intelligence agencies to stop a Democrat from being inaugurated, or later after he was inaugurated to work to get him out. Oh my goodness. The news media would never let that go. They'd say the Republicans are all corrupt. If you're a Republican, you're corrupt too. Just the way they've said about Donald Trump. He's a racist and anyone who supports him is a racist. Even if you're black, even if you're Hispanic, even if you're Asian, you're a racist because you support Donald Trump. He's a racist. We got to run you out of public. Do you see the double standard there? How can you support it? How can you support people who literally say, if you voted for someone, you're guilty of whatever they're guilty of, but they have no proof that the person that they're targeting is guilty of anything? So Mueller is rounding up, he's winding this investigation down. He's willing to take a paper interrogatory from President Trump. So President Trump will be answering questions from Mueller via paper. In other words, he's going to write out his answers or type out his answers and turn those in. He's not going to be interviewed in person. And you've also got Rod Rosenstein, who just between you, me, and the microphone, I believe Rosenstein's time will be up working for the Trump administration within that first week after the midterm elections. He's gone. But for now, he's staying there on borrowed time because it's not politically expedient. All it would be is a huge distraction. It would cause wails and all kinds of stuff from the left if he were to be let go now. But any person who says, yeah, I'll wear a wire, I'll record him, the 25th Amendment is the way we can get rid of him, that's not an employee you're keeping. But after what we saw with James Comey and the damage that caused, you know, it's wiser to keep him around. So you've got Jim Jordan here, and he's talking about how Rod Rosenstein, who was subpoenaed to testify in Congress, he didn't show up. Actually, they requested his presence. They issued a request for him to show up and testify about what he said about the 25th Amendment. He refused to show up, and now they've subpoenaed him. Jim Jordan talking here. It's number 5.
Look, when you're the guy who in reality is running the Justice Department and the chairman of the committee that has jurisdiction over your agency asks you to come, you are obligated to come, and you are obligated to come and testify under oath. He didn't do that. So if it takes a subpoena, that's exactly what should happen. We need him to answer questions about all kinds of issues associated with the Trump-Russia investigation, but specifically the statement that's alleged that he said, where he talked about actually recording the commander-in-chief of our great country, and he talked about the 25th Amendment. That's specifically what I want to ask him about.
And he's going to have to answer those questions. Now, perhaps if we can extrapolate here, he's been on Air Force One. He met with President Trump. They kept it very low key. The president didn't make a whole lot of statements about it other than we've met, we've chatted, and everything's fine. It occurred to me when I saw that statement being made that, you know, when they were talking by themselves, one of the things that was put out right before they met was that Rod Rosenstein said he was willing to resign as long as the president didn't publicly humiliate him. So he would go quietly into that good night, but he was asking not to be publicly humiliated by President Trump. Now, perhaps they came to an understanding. You just go about doing your job and keep your nose clean. I don't say anything about you. I keep my mouth shut about you. And then after the election, we readdress this issue and we'll talk. Maybe they sat down and talked, and Rosenstein said, you know, I was being sarcastic because of the tone of the meetings. And everybody else who was in the meetings that was having this discussion, they've all been neutralized. They're no longer a part of government. So, you know, that's your answer when, just as an aside, people are saying to you, I heard someone on the radio, it was a mainstream news outlet, and the news person was saying, out of the Trump campaign world, 30 people have been indicted or have, you know, been issued sentences or have pled guilty or something like that. Well, out of that 30 people, like more than half of those 30 people, over 20 of those people are Russians who will never be prosecuted. And then the rest of them, not one of them has been prosecuted and convicted on collusion or trying to influence the election. They're all being prosecuted for crimes that they committed before they ever worked for Donald Trump, either as a surrogate or in a, you know, capacity. And even Mike Flynn, General Flynn, who's been convicted of lying to FBI, no collusion, just lying to the FBI, but they've not sentenced him. Mueller keeps pushing the sentencing off. That was a witch hunt. That was a witch hunt. They did not want General Flynn working for President Trump. They didn't want him in that role. They didn't want him. They didn't want to have to come under his command and authority. They didn't want that man around. He was a danger to them, and they had to neutralize him. So, look, I have no problem with investigations, but I do have a problem with corruption. And it drives me nutso thinking about the people that we have in our armed forces all over the world risking their lives, some of them on their 3rd and 4th deployment, supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And you have a body band of ne'er-do-wells in federal government who are literally flying their finger in the sacrifice of those people. And why am I connecting those two things together? Because military people are paid through our tax dollars, but they also pay taxes. And the government that they're going out doing whatever they're doing, the orders that they're under, those come from the commander-in-chief. But if you don't think that our FBI and our CIA and those agencies, they don't play a role in how we operate around the globe and what the things our military is involved in, especially our special forces and our special operators, those guys dovetail in with our investigatory agencies. Of course they do. This is a travesty of the highest order. And people must be prosecuted for the wrongdoing that has gone on. When we allow people to do wrong and we know about it and we don't prosecute them, it encourages others who are waiting in the wings, people who might never have put their toe into the dirty swamp. They got their whole ankle in there and they're like, I'm going in. Got my waders on. I'm going to go get me some of that corruption because it's lucrative. These people must be prosecuted and brought to justice. For you, for me, for every taxpayer, for every baby in the crib, for every man, woman, and transgender popping that salute every time an officer walks by, those enlisted members, those sailors, those soldiers, those ground troops, those AWACS individuals, everybody who's serving. For them and for you and me, these people must be brought to justice. I'll be back with you tomorrow with more Stacey on the Right. God bless from the Heartland.